Hi there, Lynn Christian from Soul Salt, and I'm going to be interviewing Deborah Naish of Naish Partners, and you can find Deborah at naishpartners.com. Anybody who knows Deborah knows that she has a passion for partnering with dynamic, creative, smart people who want to make a difference and go to the next level. I met Deborah while I was attending Conversational Intelligence, a neuroscience-based coach certification program. And I was immediately impressed with her wisdom, her innate ability to use the neuroscience in her coaching. In fact, I was surprised that she was even in the certification because she has 35 years experience as an executive. In the first 15 years, she worked for companies such as Clorox and the Walt Disney Company. She's coached executives from places such as ConocoPhillips and the Wall Street Journal online. Deborah has a deep wisdom and an understanding of how to ask questions and change the neurochemistry in individuals so that they can have greater performance and go to the next level. In this interview, we're going to talk about how did we add neuroscience to our coaching? How do we define neuroscience? And if that's a benefit for you to think about also having some sort of certification with neuroscience. Again, I hope you enjoy Deborah Naish. She's a delight. A very smart individual. You can find her at naishpartners.com. Enjoy the interview. So here we are with Deborah Naish, and I'm delighted to introduce her to the audience that will be listening because she is a woman that I have come to admire and appreciate and grow from side by side. We met at a Conversational Intelligence for Coaches course offered by WBEX and presented at the time by Judith E. Glaser, the creator of Conversational Intelligence. And Deborah is a coach. We'll talk a little bit about her story in a second. Just to let you know that our discussion today will be coach to coach, talking about how we might define neuroscience and how having a course. Now, of course, our course is Conversational Intelligence, but having a course that's steeped in neuroscience has influenced and benefited our coaching businesses. So, Deborah, welcome.
Thank you. So great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you certainly caught my eye in one of our groups. And
early on.
Yes, early on.
We had a synapse connection.
We did. I so admired the quality of your questions, the way you held space for people when they were answering and listening. So let's just talk about how do you define neuroscience?
Great. All right. It's a big question. So I'm just going to say, one, I am absolutely not a scientist. So definitely not a scientist. But when this idea of studying the neuroscience of conversations came up to be in the CIQ course, it's like, that has been something I have been noticing. I'm really interested in neuroscience. So like, what the hell, what is this stuff? And so right now I define, for me, neuroscience is the study of what's happening in our brain. That's like my simple definition. Mm-hmm. And it's both the science behind it, the things, the neural pathways, what are the parts of the brain, some of which I've learned, some of which I have to check my notes again to always confirm what is it that it is.
Right.
But when it comes, the other piece is the impact. So how does what's happening in our brain impact and affect our behaviors? And that's what the connection is to coaching for me.
Could you speak a little bit more about, let's double click on that.
Yes.
Say in coaching, when you put it in that context, what is that? Open up your file and tell me what's in there.
Okay, good. And I love that you use the term double click, whether, I don't know if your audience has heard that before, but that was one of the terms from CIQ, this idea of double click like we do on computers to look deeper, open up the next file to see what is it. So when I'm coaching someone, or really also looking just even at myself, when I can step back in the moment and use neuroscience as a framework for what's happening, will give me some insight or access to some different ways to connect with somebody or to coach them.
Right.
Example, one of the biggest pieces that I use a lot is the idea of an amygdala hijack.
Right.
We have introduced that before to your audience, but the idea of helping people understand just some really super simple basics parts of neuroscience. And I talk about, there's two parts of the brain that's helpful to know: the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, which is kind of like in the back center of the brain, and right behind kind of our ears. Yeah, is that in the right place? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And when we get triggered, which we all do, when we start to see ourselves get anxious about something, when we find ourselves getting hooked, we're often having what is termed an amygdala hijack. We fall into a place of fear, and our cortisol is released, which is the stress hormone.
Right.
Out of that, it affects our ability to see the situation and to make decisions as effectively as we could. Alternatively, if we're in a place that's not so much fear and anxiety, but
Right.
in a different place in the front of our brain, in the prefrontal cortex, more associated with trust. On this part of the brain, we have more of a connection to other people. We have a sense that this is a safer place, and we can be more expansive, we can be more creative, and we can use parts of our brain, front of our brain, to help look at the situation differently than we can when we're in that hijack place.
Right.
So that's kind of the framework. And in coaching, what happens, the biggest part for me about coaching is helping people become more aware of themselves and their own responses, reactions, feelings, emotions,
Right.
as well as aware of other people.
Right.
And when people understand this dynamic about the amygdala hijack and are able to name it, then we've talked a lot about the importance of labeling and naming.
Right.
It gives you access to something else. A little more about that, but
Yeah, so I would love you to maybe expand on that, if you don't mind. What have been some of those something else's that have developed in, say, a session with a
yeah.
client?
So let me just see if I can think about some examples. So I'll have a client who is just spinning like that. This person that I was working with, and they don't believe me. They're not trusting me. I don't like what they're doing. They're just kind of go on and on, usually for a shorter time if they're talking to me, but
Right.
they'll kind of keep talking. And well, with someone who I've already introduced the concept of the amygdala hijack, take a moment and say, well, I wonder if this is a moment where you're having an amygdala hijack.
Hmm.
And just by saying that, we'll give the person some time to reflect, say, could be, maybe not first say yes, but then we can talk about what's gone on for them, what they got triggered by, and could you interpret what happened differently? If you weren't so hooked by the way you thought the intention of the other person was, could you see it differently? Just the other day, I had an example with a client who got an email from the accountant in the office, and she read the email as if he was unhappy with her about some things.
Okay.
I read the email as he was asking questions.
Interesting.
So when we were able to help her look back and potentially reframe. It's another CIQ tool. A lot of us use it in coaching also, like just change how we look at things. She could see, I probably could have responded differently to that. That's being back in her prefrontal cortex, about that ability to respond in a different way.
So she became more intelligent in the conversation inside of her head, and also the opportunity from the email conversation.
And looked at different options that she could take.
Right.
But in addition, not only that one example, but one of the benefits of coaching is to kind of use a single example and extrapolate it to how's this going to show up in other parts of my life? How can I take a breath and notice if I read an email or have a conversation with somebody and I respond and I'm excitable and find myself everybody knows kind of where, and we all do it, like that's normal behavior. But as soon as you notice it, can you stop, take a breath, pause for a moment and reflect? Am I reactive because I'm afraid, I'm in fight flight mode,
right,
our fear response? And if so, what can I do to just take another moment and see how can I name it, which is one thing that helps us get back into prefrontal cortex. What can I do to ask a different question? Can I interpret this differently? This is super helpful. It's so automatic for me now. I don't even know that I refer to it as neuroscience. It's just an automatic part of how I live personally and how I coach others.
Well, I think that's one of the nice things about having a neuroscience course or certification or background that you add to coaching is it gives, I'm going to use a word and see if this works for you too, context. Yes. Greater context for what's happening within the individual.
Yes, absolutely. And our ability to notice when we've come up against some of the pieces, some of the other ideas are just how important connection is.
Right.
You know, just like you mentioned how we connected. So we were on a Zoom call, just like we are now. And there was something in the way we were both speaking that independently, not knowing that each other, kind of felt there's like this definite connection across the virtual world.
Right.
That felt like incredibly tangible. And in neuroscience, we talk about, actually, and I forgot the term. What's the term when you're...
Cybernetic loop.
Cybernetic loop, connected.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, I didn't know that term, the idea of that now having that term for it makes it even more powerful, knowing that there's these kinds of connections that happen.
Which are the beginning of trust. Like there was something about you that I picked out that was like, this is somebody I could get to know, somebody where I feel like trust could build, someone I would want to learn from and learn with. That's that cybernetic loop we were both feeling unbeknownst to us at the time, right?
Together, and we have actually had the same experience. I had the same thing. I really want to get to know this person. I want to learn with her. And over now, it's almost 2 years, we have created this deeper, more intimate, trusting, connected relationship.
Yes. And we've really only seen each other face to face twice. Yes. Once in a July meeting with Judith and the rest of the team, and then we met in a mastermind last year. Yes. So let's just kind of give we'll just give a very simple preview, and you can add here. We'll just riff off of each other. For those of you who are listening, there are things that happen inside the brains, and of course there are different models. Judith E. Glaser taught us there were 4 brains in the head, and then I have a multiple brain integration background that tells me there's also a neural network in the heart that's very complex, and one in the enteric system. So if we start back here and we touch this part of our head, we all have a brain stem. The brain stem is connected, of course, to the vagal nerve. Studying Porges's work on the polyvagal theory, you'll know that information flows up from the body through that to the brainstem, and the brainstem basically says, run away, freeze, appease, or fight. And so when we're in those modes, we're not that intelligent, but we're in survival mode, right?
Right.
And then right up above that and in the middle where this amygdala is that you've been talking about is the limbic brain. So we have this primitive brain, a limbic brain that's connected to, and that's where we store, among other things, our history of emotions.
Right.
So we've all had the experience of seeing somebody's face and going, I don't know where I've met them, but I don't think it was a happy experience. Or I don't know how I've met them, but I feel warmth in my heart. That amygdala that's inside the limbic brain, and the limbic brain is storing all that, right?
Right.
Then we have the neocortex up here, kind of in the back of the brain where you put your hat on, and that's for knowledge, logic, bringing information in, analysis, not really connected to the heart yet, but really doing some heavy lifting as far as thinking processes. Then the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive brain, the highest evolved brain, the one that can make really tough decisions in difficult situations, the one that can see the future, join with other people. Then we have neurons in the heart that are about connection and core values, and the enteric brain, which is about taking action and courage. So when we coach, all that stuff is going on inside of people. And what I'm getting from listening to you is by taking neuroscience as part of your choice of study, you now have opened up a world of understanding where people are when you're conversing with them and when you're coaching them, or when they come into a session and they've had an upset or a triumph. And so I hope that I was trying to put a lot of stuff together to put the context, but anything you want to say off of that or riff off of that?
Well, a couple of things. One, thank you for, excuse me, for the lesson, like the body lesson of kind of knowing where everything is. And if any coaches are listening, I want to reiterate that you don't even have to know as much as Lyn knows to be able to use neuroscience.
Right.
So, because Lyn, you've studied it a lot more, and you have your own brain that can remember all of those pieces. My brain doesn't remember everything quite as well, but the concepts that come out and that ability to recognize we can help ourselves and support others in coaching by understanding some of the dynamics is kind of key. And you don't have to remember exactly which piece of the brain is what and where in order to use it. I think that's just an added piece, I would say.
Yeah.
The other piece that I have found super valuable is recognizing that science has caught up with many of us who have been in coaching for a long time, have known for a long time, the connection between the gut and the heart and the brain. And the willingness to recognize that if you're feeling something in your gut, you have some intuition, some sense, or it's literally you're feeling some anxiety in there, like to use that as information and not dismiss it. So one of the constant things that I talk about with my clients is how to become more and more aware of what's happening in our bodies and in our thoughts as information and not absolute. Don't give it so much meaning, like in an absolute way.
Right.
Like how to stay curious about it. Like a big piece. And I feel like that has also been part of the study of neuroscience that has helped me integrate that into my own life and coaching.
Well, there's something that you've become quite a specialist at that's helped me. I'm going to call specialist because you notice it faster than most people. That's helped me notice this and honor it. And that is what you've taught me about noticing when people are in resistance.
Yes.
They're critical, maybe they're resisting, and you've actually realized, okay, that's not a time to judge people. they're back here, maybe not at their best thinking. They're not in the prefrontal cortex. They don't have a connection with those heart neurons. Trust is low.
Yeah.
Would you speak to what you've learned, because neuroscience gave you the backdrop, and now you apply it in terms of when you see resistance?
Yeah, thanks so much, because I am definitely, probably because of my own life experience of encountering in my personal life a lot of resistance, and in so many moments where you feel like resistance is just a somebody stopping no, somebody saying no, or we're not going to do that, or putting up a lot of barriers. Was really out of the CIQ work, out of Judith's work, that she introduced this concept of the Conversational Dashboard, and that go from where are we on that dashboard, from resistance, where just someone being a resistor, not interested, to a skeptic, like really just questioning but somewhat open, to wait and see, to experimenter, to co-creator. So there's more. We can come back. You can maybe look at sharing some of that tool. But I had delved into resistance and this idea of recognizing resistance is just part of the process. And in the moment that you stop pushing back on resistance and accept it, or even, as I like to say, bring it on, like as soon as you notice that somebody else is resistant, you kind of go, wow, that's great, tell me more. Like, why are you resistant? Then, yeah, okay, great.
There we go.
There's the tool. As you are in that place where there's somebody who's a resistor, whether it's one person or it's a group of people, don't allow yourself to shut down and just move into cell mode. Instead, engage with the person and engage with the resistor as something positive. And use that as an opportunity to learn what could be in the way. Now, even people who are selling are often doing that, because ask the question, oh, well, what's in the way, and how can I turn this around, and what can I do? But when you're selling, you're always asking that from a question of, how am I going to convert them to what I want now?
You have this agenda.
There's an agenda. There's like a place you're going to. Instead, if you can be back in the space, talked before about the importance of connection. If you could just be in a moment, be back to a space of, well, I'm just going to connect with this person. I'm not trying to convince or sell them of anything. There's a high probability that that resistor, the person who's in a resistor space, is going to be able to see something that they didn't see, and you may see something you didn't see. As a result, you may move along this arc, potentially to the place even of co-creator, but at least potentially move into a different place of trust. It goes from low trust to conditional trust to high trust. So, yeah, I have a couple other tools. It depends on where we are in time. I could share about kind of resisting.
Yeah, well, let's just capstone this one, and I'll let you share. So at the back of the brain, we're resisting. You can see it in the red, and Judith has taught us that doesn't mean stop and make that bad. That means slow down or pause and see how come there's resistance. Ask yourself, what could be happening? There's a good reason the person's in resistance. Is it something about me, about them, about their environment? Is it all of the above? Before you can get into the co-creating. Now, some people can just jump right into co-creating. We sort of did that in our first encounter of meeting each other on our first call with these students. We were like, oh, there's something there. And we were listening to each other and picking up. And so we came in with very little resistance,
right?
Because of maybe where we were that day or where we were in our life. But so, yeah. Should I take the dashboard down? Do you want to do something else?
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to us. There was something else that you were.
I was going to just offer.
Yeah.
one other tool that is not neuroscience per se, but it is something just related to resistance and a way of being, is to recognize that when somebody's being resistant, a lot of times one of the best things you can do is not just try to push back on it, but
Right.
sort of allow it to occur. And one of the images that I use for that is to be Tempur-Pedic. So the Tempur-Pedic beds and
Yes.
pillows,
Yeah.
you can push them down and they bounce back up. When you kind of allow yourself to just accept the resistance and not push back against it, you'll bounce back, and the other person will feel that you've received it.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows people to stop fighting, be in that place.
Yes. I think that has a lot to do with neuroscience, though. If you think about Judith,
Yeah.
that all conversations and interactions either have a push, I'm pushing you towards something, or just a draw and open up and just say, how do you, you can enter, you can stand up here, you can speak. So it's almost like, I think that concept of push or pull energy is underpinning what you're saying.
I think that you're right. Yeah, it definitely, it feels like it's related to neuroscience. I just don't know which the science part of it, but it is certainly
right.
part of that energetic dynamic. And I think that that's, over time, I believe that neuroscience is going to keep finding more and more scientific data about the energetic connections that we can't necessarily see under a microscope,
right?
But that do exist.
That we've felt, esoteric practices or human connection or your intuition, you've known there's something there. It's kind of like before we knew what magnets were, we could feel north and south connect. And then if you put north and north, it would repel each other. And then later on, we understood the dynamics of magnetic attraction, but the same thing that's happening here.
That's right. I'll give you one other tool just because I want to be kind of clear. The other thing about resistor, there are some times where you're with somebody and their energy is just like a whirling dervish, and where it could be more like, so it's another T, Tempur-Pedic, and then tornado. If you're engaged with somebody who's just kind of like a tornado, really, a lot of times the best thing to do is find shelter and retreat, not necessarily engage with the tornado moment, and allow things to settle down. And after the tornado, you can come back and re-engage. So the ability to notice, what am I engaging with and where am I in the moment, gives us tools for how to respond. What are some different ways to address the situation without making myself kind of all stressed and crazy in the process.
Right. So I get to appreciate, you already came into this coaching class with inner wisdom, life experience. You had a company that you were running, you'd had some clients, and then you engaged in a neuroscience-based coach training certification program.
Yeah.
So would you speak a little bit about how that expanded your work and your ability to feel more grounded and more sure about what you were doing?
Sure. So I started coaching more than 20 years ago, before, when you really had to spend a lot of time telling people what coaching was.
Right. Yeah.
And, still people don't always know what coaching is, but it's so much more common today.
Right.
And I did not do coach training. So I came out of industry, out of business, kind of 15 years of working and running organizations, and I did not do coach training. It evolved over time, a lot of different learning. CIQ is really the first certification that I felt drawn to do. And what I appreciate so much about it is a lot of the frameworks that Judith Glaser created to help coaches, and then help coaches help their clients to learn about themselves. Because I feel like that's all what coaching is right. Our ability to get better and better at an ongoing life journey of learning about ourselves and others and how do we interact.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that the main key piece was understanding what's actually happening in the brain and the body, and how can that benefit my clients. And it has. And I have, my business has taken off in the past year, and my clients use Tempur-Pedic and Tornado and Resistor and understand Amygdala Hijack, and are able to use some of these particular concepts as little pieces that help them get grounded when they're not.
Right.
We all fall, I call it falling off the balance board. We all do. And what do we do when that happens?
Well, it's like getting a breath of fresh air, and maybe some of our audience will feel the same way, because it's just two coaches. We've been coaching. I've been coaching since 98. You've been coaching since
97.
Yeah. And we ran into conversational intelligence about the same time.
Yes.
We're grateful for the neuroscience that's sort of bringing science to things we already had a hint about, but we could read patterns better now, or identify things and normalize them, right?
Yeah, and that idea, and you and I are also, like, we're so in sync, like we both are really resonated with Brene Brown's Dare to Lead
Yes.
book, and also very overlapping to the CIQ, but very much similar to the kind of work we're doing, and the importance of vulnerability and connection and authenticity in being a human being, particularly in the workplace. All of my work is with leadership executives.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great journey. If anybody listening is interested in CIQ, I strongly encourage and recommend investigating it, exploring it, see if it resonates with you, and take the course, or at a minimum, watch some of the webinars.
Right.
I don't want to be a commercial for CIQ, but I kind of am a commercial for CIQ.
Well, we've had such a positive experience, and I think it's okay to be blatant about it, because we have such deep respect, both of us, for Judith.
Yes.
And her work. So I'm going to give 3 resources. While I'm giving those, maybe you can give 3, and we'll wrap up for our audience. If anything we're talking about is really interesting to you, especially this innate ability or innate trait all human beings have for connection. Good book to read is Social by Matt Lieberman, or you can watch Matt Lieberman's TED Talk. Another that Deborah's just mentioned is Brene Brown. While Judith E. Glaser comes from the neuroscience in her work called Conversational Intelligence, Brene Brown is going to come from the social sciences and say the same things, but with a different set of words and approaching it from a different facet of the diamond. And then finally, I would say, if you're interested in knowing more about how Judith, while she was alive in these last few years, and even before, used conversational intelligence, go to the podcast Judith and I started together before she passed away, which is What's Your Conversational Intelligence? And you'll get a taste of Judith and her work and how she applied things with her clients. And those are great tutorials for anybody that's in coaching or anybody that's in business. So 3 things. I hope that's given you some time to think. Deborah, what would be
my
looking at your books?
I'm looking at my books things. I would have to reiterate Dare to Lead. I just see that as a core piece. Another big resource for me, and in the work that I've done, comes from the Conscious Leadership Group and the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. They also have a number of videos online, short, like 3-minute videos that are phenomenal ways to get in touch with who are you being, not just what are you doing, and highly recommend that. And then Brendan Bouchard's work on high performance is also one of my go-to resources right now. So those are kind of 3 resources that are super valuable for me, in addition, of course, to the CIQ work.
Right. Yeah. Well,
actually, I'm going to add one more.
Yeah, please.
A person who I am following and I'm a big fan of is Brian Johnson.
Right.
Optimize. I introduced you, Lynn.
You did, yes.
And Brian is like a concierge of bringing together all kinds of material, from ancient wisdom to current philosophers, and he himself sees himself as a philosopher, and he gives you little nuggets that have been super valuable for me personally and in my coaching. Yeah. So Brian Johnson, Optimize.
Yes. Yes, and thank you for that tip. He does a great job, and you're going to be joining him in a Spartan race, and if I can pull it off this year, I'll come join you in your Spartan race.
I know, that's one of the things to talk about. Like, our big thing is get outside your comfort zone. I'm like really great at coaching other people on getting outside their comfort zone, and the physical one is one that is not at all comfortable for me. So stepping up and saying I'm going to do a Spartan race in 6 months is pushing outside that comfort zone.
Huge. Yes.
So thanks for your support in that.
Yes, because that's, again, I think that's another thing I want to make blatantly obvious to our listeners, is that both you and I have a practice, and maybe this is one of the reasons why we were so attracted to connecting, is that we have a personal philosophy that our clients are there getting out of the comfort zone. They're going to the next level. That requires shifting and changing, evolving and being generative. It requires being soft-hearted and open-minded. And if we're not doing that ourselves, you can just see, Deborah took up this challenge from Brian to join in a Spartan race. And we both have practices in our lives where we're pushing those edges so that we live in the same dynamic that we're supporting our clients to live in.
Always feel like it's a key
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation with you and with anybody listening. It's super great.
There's a lot going on right now that we're learning in the world of neuroscience and science in general, that's starting to explain a lot of the human dynamics and the inner workings that we haven't had the ability to put actual names to or context to, and now we can. And so one of the great benefits for a coach to study something about neuroscience is to get the science and research behind those hunches or those practices that work, to understand the why and the how come they work, and improve your professional status with yourself. And then finally getting, okay, so this has been documented. It's not just my hunch.
Yeah.
What would you say, Deborah?
I'll just add on to that, this idea of when you are meeting with a client and you talk about neuroscience today, I think it adds another level of sophistication and credibility, even among those people who are skeptics. So it can help people get over a bit of a hump to engage with you. And it also is just fun. It's like pretty exciting and amazing to learn things that you didn't know and validate things that you thought made sense to you and now see them grounded in science. So learn about neuroscience.
I love it.
Great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we will we'll see each other again, because we've joined a mastermind together and connected on this topic and other topics. But thank you for your time. If anybody wanted to know very quickly, and of course in the introduction we gave them links to how to find you, but just as a last thought, how can people best find you and approach you if they have more questions or want to know what you're doing?
Great, thank you. So I have a website. It'll be up on your information, but www.naishpartners, NAISHpartners.com. There's a way to get a free consultation with me. I work with individuals, primarily individuals who are already successful and are looking at how to get themselves to the next level and willing to push beyond their current comfort zone. So I work with executives in large corporations, small companies, and a lot of entrepreneurs. So I look forward to hearing from you if you're interested. Thank you.
This is a great person. I love this lady. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Blessings.